And welcome to the Contenders Project, where each week we are urging you, as Jude urged his readers, to contend for your faith that was once for all entrusted to God's holy people. Today, and over the next several weeks, we will be diving into a new series that we are calling I'll Do It Tomorrow, talking about finding the power to change. The big idea in this series is that we will explore the difficulties of change and the Christian life. We will look at topics like procrastination, sanctification, and then the importance of cultivating spiritual habits in our life to help us navigate change. The ultimate idea is that change in a Christian's life is actually a life-giving process that we can either embrace, avoid, or run from. Today's bottom line is that change is a part of life. It will either bring us closer to God or take us further away from Him. Change is a part of life, and it will either bring us closer to God or take us further away from Him. Change is the one constant in life. Seasons change, people change, governments change, animals change. The list could go on and on. Some of these changes can be positive and exciting. A promotion at work, the first cool day of fall after a long summer, or your favorite team winning the World Series or Super Bowl. Other changes in life can be painful and negative. The loss of a marriage, unexpectedly being let go from your job, having your child go through a traumatic accident. All of these experiences are changes in life and can bring about either happiness, sadness, joy, or fear. In time, we all see various changes that occur throughout our life. Some good, some bad. But in time, all things change. And that's the thing. Time is one thing that human beings cannot produce or increase. We must live with time and the changes that it brings. We do not have control, and that can at times be unsettling when we can't prevent change. King Solomon, the writer of Ecclesiastes, knew that change sits deep at the heart of life. Ecclesiastes 3, looking at verses 1 through 8, Ecclesiastes 3, 1 through 8, say that there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. A time to embrace and a time to refrain. A time to search and a time to give up. A time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear and a time to mend. A time to be silent and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. Solomon here in Ecclesiastes emphasizes for everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. He goes on to say and state then different seasons and examples in life. A time to be born and a time to die. a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted. He goes on also describing many different aspects of life as well, discussing war, construction, mourning, celebration, scattering, gathering, mending. I believe the idea that Solomon writes about here is that in time, we all experience change. We all experience ups, downs, gains, losses. We experience growth. We experience setbacks. We experience times where we celebrate and when we mourn. We experience and live in a world that is constantly changing. And we can either accept and leverage these changes to bring us closer to God, or we can ignore, hide, or run from these changes. The thing to put into perspective that I believe most people don't truly wrap their minds around is that ignoring, hiding from, running from, or not accepting change doesn't stop change from happening. When we think that we can stop change, when we think that we can avoid change, or when we think that we can reverse change, or that things won't change in our life, we are only putting off the inevitable, which is our acceptance and opportunity to grow through said change. And oftentimes, our unwillingness to do all of these things in the midst of change denies God the opportunity to work in our lives throughout the change that we experience. Therefore, not growing closer to God, but taking us further from Him. The reassurance and the comfort that we do have in the midst of change, when we turn to God to help us deal with it and grow through it, is that we have a God that does not change, which gives us comfort and peace. Because in a world that is unreliable, packed full of uncertainty, we have a God who is reliable, certain, and consistent. Malachi 3:6 says, God, Yahweh, speaking directly to his people, describing himself. He says, "For I, the Lord, Yahweh, do not change. Therefore you, O children of Jacob, are not destroyed." God speaks of his unchanging nature as he describes how the people of Israel have constantly turned away from him. God describes how his posture of love and grace toward his people is not what changes, but only our wavering commitment and obedience. But he does go on to say in verse 7, "Return to me, and I will return to you." In change, God doesn't change. In change, God does not abandon us. In change, God reaches out to us so that we can grow closer to him. Old Testament scholar J. Stafford Wright, he writes, "Man is to take his life day by day from the hand of God, realizing that God has fitting time for each thing to be done." In the midst of change, we should all recognize that each exact moment is God-given and should be lived in recognition of that fact. One of the hardest things hardest changes to accept is death. But death, in its own turn, has a way of helping people reflect on life. When someone we know, or even a celebrity, dies unexpectedly, it can cause us to reflect on the fragility of life. When Shaquille O'Neal's teammate, Kobe Bryant, died suddenly in a helicopter crash, a tearful Shaq described slowing down and thinking. He said, "It makes me think that in life, sometimes instead of holding back certain things, we should just do. We take stuff for granted." And I think in any type of change that is difficult, we do tend to hold back or even run from when that doesn't stop the change. We should maybe instead just do or accept it. It can be easy to put off until tomorrow what we should do today, because change is going to happen. We can put off fully following God, assuming that our life will stay the same, but who knows what tomorrow will bring. The question is, are the changes in life going to bring us closer to God or take us further away from Him? Are the changes in life going to bring us closer to God or take us further away from Him? Because change is a part of life. And it will either bring us closer to God or take us further from Him. So, which one will you choose? To contend for your relationship with God this week, begin by taking significant time to evaluate the changes that you are currently navigating in life. How are they affecting you? How are they challenging you? What positive or negatives are resulting from these changes? And then the big question, are you allowing them to bring you closer to God? And if not, what could you be doing differently? As you now discuss in your groups the questions and the prompts that have been provided, I encourage you to discuss openly with each other some of the changes that you are currently experiencing, and be open about the struggles that you are experiencing with them. And it's with that I again want to thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next week for the next Contenders Project.